Still spinning. There we go. And we're live here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. What's up, guys? Nick Scripp on the P2W Fantasy Podcast, on the first podcast following the big NFL draft. And I'm very excited about this one today. I have two great guests with me to kind of do a recap, kind of do a little bit of a reflection on some potential viewpoints that came from this NFL draft. But before we get into any of the topics here today, I do want to make sure that I introduce both of these guys and let them plug what they do, because they are both super busy within the fantasy community and have a bunch of stuff going on themselves. So to start things off, to my left or right here, I have Coop, who is the lead analyst for the Fantasy Alarm. I know you do a podcast on there. You also have the Fantasy Football Besties and Lightning Round as well. You and I were kind of talking a little bit about what you got coming up. I know you have some big guests lined up, and you're at it pretty frequently during the week. So, Coop, can you let everybody know where to find you for one? And then for two, can you talk about what you have going on?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, thanks for having me, man. So yeah, you can see Coop Fiasco on Twitter. Anything I have, I post that there. So articles, podcast links, all that goes through. Lightning Round actually just got picked up by Fantasy Alarm. So now everything's kind of running through Fantasy Alarm, keeps it nice and tight. And you know, people that know my work, or maybe that don't, know that I'm a big tight end guy. Got a big tight end series I do every year, but I'm just constantly covering everything out there. So come check it out.
Awesome. I do see you frequently tagged all the time about, like, somebody's asking about a tight end sleeper or an opinion on some guy, and you seem to be like that go-to. So that's great, because I know that's not the only thing obviously you talk to, but having a specific position that a lot of people think about your name all the time is awesome. It shows a lot, and it speaks numbers there. Also with me on the bottom here, Geoff, I know you were involved with Fantasy Pros, but you are the leader of Going for Two. You guys got a massive website over there. I know you have the podcast too, the Armchair Fantasy Show for Going for Two Live. You guys have a bunch of guests coming up. I was kind of peeping that a little bit, and this is your second time on the show. I think we've linked up before. Other than that, interact a lot. I think the one time you did come on, I had to make you the host for a minute because I dipped out of my own stream, which was fun. But I'm glad you're back on, Geoff. Can you let everybody know where to find you for one, and then for two, talk about what you got going on?
All right, yeah, you can find me at Jeff Lambert 77. As you mentioned, I've been writing for Fantasy Pros now for almost 5 years. Also a ranker over there as well. Going for Two, we got 30-ish writers on staff currently. Some of them take the off-season off, but a lot of them are still doing Dynasty content right now. And then we have Going for Two Live, which is live pretty much Monday through Friday. My show is on Wednesday nights at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And like you mentioned, we have a huge month. We got Jeff Hasley this week. We got Mike Clay next week. We have Ryan McDowell the following week. And we cap it off with Scott Fish in the last week. So huge May for us. Just excited to check us out on YouTube. We're on Twitch. We're on Facebook Live. We're on Twitter. We're everywhere.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a big list of names and a lot to look forward to. You guys will be definitely busy during this time of year. So thank you guys both for coming on. I know it wasn't like the most extensive of notice, but should be a great show today. As always, this podcast is partnered up with the Fantasy Points Media Group, which is a branch of Fantasy Points. Go check out fantasypoints.com. One-stop shop for all of your fantasy football needs. If you are listening to the show now, it's going to be a good one. Stick with us.
Play to win, no fear to give. I feel, but I can't forgive. I go all in this time, yeah, I won't regret. I'll pick the best on trip, they don't understand. I play to win, yeah, I play to win, I play to win. Yeah, play to win, I play to win. Oh, play to win, I play to win. Yeah, play to win, I play to win.
All right. And if you guys want to comment, you'll have to do it on YouTube. Can't do it on Twitter just yet. Hopefully one day they sort that out, but we'll put it on the screen and check those out. But what we have going on today, Factor Cap. And I always joke around that I turned 30 in October, so I'm trying to like stay hip and cool with the times. So cap means like false. That's what I was told. But we just had the NFL draft. We see all of these takes that are coming right away. It was almost instant as the picks were being made, but a lot of reactions. And, you know, sometimes you kind of have to decipher when people have some statements to what happens in the football world. If these statements are more fact or cap, so true or false. So I'll have some statements here after some brief facts and ask Coop and Geoff if these statements that are regarding the NFL draft and what happened, again, are more fact or cap. So starting off with the New York Jets. So the Jets selected Breece Hall with the 36th overall pick in this draft. Hall finished with 3,941 rushing yards, 82 receptions for 734 receiving yards, and 56 scrimmage touchdowns. Michael Carter was drafted in the 4th the year prior. Carter had 639 rushing yards, 36 catches, and he had 5 games of 14-plus fantasy points. So, fact or cap will go to Coop first. Michael Carter's presence will limit Breece Hall from being a RB1. Is that more fact or more cap, and why?
I mean, I'm going to say cap. And, you guys can see all the stuff behind me. You can see that I'm wearing Patriot stuff right now. So, I'm an unbiased analyst here when I say that the Patriots crushed this draft. I mean, the Jets crushed this draft, man. They smoked it, dude. And I will say, I love what the offense is doing with the offensive line, Mekhi Becton, all these guys. When I look at a guy like Breece Hall, and when you go and take a guy 36, he's going to play some role. And you look at, his profile that he's a pass catching back. I don't play in any standard leagues, so I don't honestly even really care about a guy getting the full workload as long as he gets the passing downs, right? Like you look at the work that Scott Barrett did to me, which is kind of a famous article, the one he did where he looked at the value of receptions versus carries, where he basically showed that in PPR leagues, it's worth like 2.7 more than a carry. And even in standard leagues, it's like 1.4 more than a carry. So, guys like Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler never had a 1,000-yard season, right? For me, I don't care as much about being the full 3-down back as a rookie as I do just getting a role at all and having it be that pass catching role. So to me, I am super interested in Breece Hall. He's my 101, and I'm not super worried about Michael Carter long term. Short term, maybe it's a split, but I think he's a guy that's going to find his way into the top 24. I don't know about you guys.
All right, I'm going to shift the same question, and I'll have some random follow-up questions just because I like to throw some curveballs. But Geoff, same question. Michael Carter's presence will limit Breece Hall from being a RB1. Fact or cap?
I'm going cap as well. I think the NFL right now is pretty much committees all over the place. I mean, there's a couple places where you have a lead, a quote-unquote lead back, but most of the time there's a committee of some sort. And I'm going to point back to 2020, actually. Antonio Gibson was RB13, so just outside of a top 12, and J.D. McKissick had 100 targets and 80 catches. So, and that was on a team that wasn't very good. So you think of the Jets, if their offense can be anything better than it was last year, and especially with the draft they just had with Garrett Wilson being drafted as well, that offense should be better. As long as they're scoring points, I think both of these guys can coexist. And I don't think there's going to be any problem with Breece Hall being an RB1, and I wouldn't be scared to draft him.
So Coop said that he is his 101. Geoff, would you say the same if you were on the clock right now? Super flex, one quarterback league, regardless. Is he your 101 as well, or how do you view that?
It's funny that you asked that because I literally just traded up to get the 101 like an hour ago. Oh, and I was talking to a friend of mine. So I'm like, yeah. And I was like, I hate being pigeonholed into a pick. Like, I feel like Breece Hall is everybody's 101. And I always hate being the one to have to pick the guy that's consensus, because then if he busts, you're kind of in that same crowd. So I'm like, do I take Walker? Do I take Walker? But honestly, if it comes down to it, it's going to be Breece Hall. I think Breece Hall is the 101. And it's the pass catching that kind of puts him apart. Walker, we didn't see it in college. Now, can he do it? Maybe. We don't know. But the offense that he was in, we didn't see it, so we don't know if he can do it or not. We know Breece Hall can do it, so I'll take the safe pick and go with Breece Hall at 101 as well.
All right, I think all three of us are on the same page there. And the last question, jump in how you want. Michael Carter, so we don't have to dive super deep into it. Just as a fantasy player, do you have any interest in rostering this guy, or does Breece Hall just completely kick his tires aside and you're not interested anymore? I know you both kind of mentioned a lot of systems these days are somewhat of a committee or have two guys operating in them. What's your brief thoughts on Michael Carter? You guys can jump in how you want.
Yeah, I mean, I was a fan of grabbing him before this draft. I actually did grab him for cheap in one league just because I was like, you know what, the Jets might not take a running back. You know, we have no idea. They ended up taking one, which does hurt, but I like that offensive line. I like the setup. And the thing about a guy like Robert Saleh, who comes over from the 49ers, is that that's been the whole game over there. Is they don't care about draft capital, or at least, you know, Shanahan, that crew did. We just watched Trey Sermon not play at all with a 6th-round guy, Elijah Mitchell, play over him. They took another guy this year. It's like, you know, he brought over his own guy, Tevin Coleman, and Coleman didn't really cut it. So he didn't even lean on his own guy that he brought in. So I think that, you know, everyone's going to get a clean slate. They're going to get a shot. I just think Breece Hall is that guy. He's that good. Now, if they had brought in Kenneth Walker, like Jeff kind of mentioned there, like had they brought him in, then I would still be interested in Michael Carter, because I've seen Michael Carter catch 10 passes in a game from Mike White. You know, in that backfield, now Michael Carter maybe gets that role. I just think that Breece Hall is better than him at everything. And now we look at it and say, well, now there's a 2nd-round running back versus 4th-round running back. It's looking pretty ugly. So Michael Carter's, I'm not going out to get him right now. I'll keep him, but I'm also not afraid to drop him if Breece Hall just takes over. So I don't know what you think, Jeff.
Yeah, so I'm sort of in the same boat as you. I do think I am buying because of his depressed value right now. I think, you know, people are all down on him. Oh, you know, Breece Hall's going to take the full workload. I mean, he's still a rookie. But look at Jonathan Taylor, his rookie season. Nyheim Hines was still, I think, an RB2 that year. So Breece Hall, if he starts slow, or if they do run that split like the 49ers did, you know, for so long with 2 running backs basically getting the workload, I'd buy Michael Carter cheap right now if you can get him, because I'm not too worried. I do think they're going to have a role for him. I think he showed last year that he can be a decent running back in this league, and I do think that Saleh wants to take over that same sort of philosophy with the running backs, and it works. I mean, it keeps those guys healthy. And you got them at the end of the season and they're fresh, you're gonna have an advantage over most of the teams in December when everybody's kind of cold and worn down. You got 2 fresh running backs that have been sharing a workload, kind of like what Cleveland does with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, where they're both fresh at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'll say in the chat, if you want to throw it up there, Tyler Orginski goes, what's cheap for Carter? I mean, you look at the hit rates for 3rd-round picks in Dynasty. I mean, it's like we're talking 10% or lower most of the times. Everyone loves to jump out and grab the names where they're like, oh, well, you could have got Chris Godwin or you could have got Aaron Jones. I mean, for every one of those guys, there's so many guys, even in the 2nd round, that are brutal. So I think that Jeff's right, that if you're sitting there in the 3rd round and you're like, you know, somebody's like, what do you want for this pick? And you don't have a guy that you really like that you think can really pop, and all the guys that went day 1 and 2 are gone, I'd say, you know, throw me Michael Carter, right? Because I think his hit rate, the chances of him being a successful player is probably still higher than 10%, considering what we've seen. Yeah. And a lot of these guys are 10% or less, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's a great draft day move, because when we're all sitting maybe in our home league garage or whatever, and everybody is anticipating being a part of the draft, and guys are antsy to draft, you got that 303 pick and somebody sitting next to you and hasn't picked since, you know, the 108 or something like that. It's great time to capitalize. But
yeah, I think a lot of times too, we're doing like a million mock drafts as analysts, right? And we kind of know who's going to be there, who's not going to be there. Yeah. And then you see a guy that you thought was going to be gone is on the board still, then you might be, you know, apt to trade a guy like Michael Carter to get your guy. So I definitely agree with that sentiment.
There we go. So Breece Hall looked at as the RB1 of this class. So the wide receiver one in terms of how the NFL operated in the draft, Drake London, first wide receiver off the board as we shift to the next question here. But USC product, Drake London, selected 8th overall as the wide receiver one. After a year, he caught 88 balls for 1,084 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. In the year prior, Kyle Pitts was selected 4th overall to the Falcons. London, 6'4" guy, Kyle Pitts, 6'6" guy, 2 big-bodied receivers. Some may look at this team as having 2 guys that might be somewhat similar in being 2 bigger possession guys. Maybe they're very different in your guys' eyes, but that kind of rose the question. I kind of saw this a few times with that pick being made, but factor cap, the Falcons should have drafted a wide receiver less like Kyle Pitts. And we'll go to Jeff first in this one. What's your thoughts there?
So I think for year one, I'm a little worried. I always saw Drake London as sort of a 1B to another receiver's 1A. And that 1A might be Calvin Ridley, which we know he's not going to play this year. Let's hope he plays next year. So I do like him more for next year with that sort of 1A alpha receiver on the field and Drake London being a possession guy, and then you get your tight end in the middle. But I think for this year, I do think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle because they don't have that field stretcher to really, open up the middle of the field where these two guys both are going to work at. So I do think they kind of take from each other a little bit, to where they're both going to be good, but they're not going to be as good as you want them to be, because they're going to kind of steal from each other. But once they get Calvin Ridley back, if they do get Calvin Ridley back, I think it opens the offense up quite a bit. And then I think that the offense can be 10 times better in 2023.
Yeah.
All right. Coop, same question, man.
I was gonna say I'm right with Geoff on that, because it is fairly rare for teams to have three guys all get an elite level of targets. I mean, if you talk about 100 target teams, Geoff brought up J.D. McKissic getting 100 targets. Yeah. That is one of that was one of only two teams that year, right? And it's McKissic, Logan Thomas, McLaurin. No one even predicted that, right? In 2019 it was the Panthers. In 2018 it was the Giants. Those are the only teams that were doing it, right? So it's not that often you get these three highly consolidated guys at the top, and it's even harder to guess. Right? Like every once in a while you get a team like the Bengals that just rolls the same 11 guys out every single play, and that works out. But even then, Tyler Boyd wasn't really that great. So at the end of the day, it's going to end up being two of those guys. I'm going cap on this for a different part of the sentence. Basically, do you think the Falcons should have drafted a wide receiver? You can stop right there. And I say that I don't think they should have. I think this team is kind of building it backwards, where I like what the Dolphins did, where you tank, you get the offensive line, you get the defensive line, you get the quarterback. They didn't even bring in Jalen Waddle and Will Fuller until 2 years after the tank. They tanked in 19, then they waited to 21. And then in 22, they bring in Tyreek Hill. Now they're ready to compete, whether you think Tua or not. They're kind of building the backwards windows here, where by the time you get, say Mariota doesn't work, by the time you get a quarterback, get him up to speed, now you got to pay these guys, man. Yeah. Like they kind of built it backwards. That's why for me, the sentence is cap before you even get to, they should have gone with the struggle. And you know what I mean? In my opinion.
I didn't look at it at all that way, but that is extremely smart of a point, because I feel like we look at this team, we say, hey, great young tight end, right? And great young wide receiver. But then you look at the holes everywhere else. You're like, well, how's this team going to operate moving forward? And the part about them getting paid down the road when you're probably just starting to get the wheels going, it's going to put them in a weird situation, because they might not perform to the degree that they have wanted them to, but they know they're talented, but they're kind of building. It's a lot of moving parts. But for Drake London, and we'll go Coop, Geoff, I got a side question. So for me, prior to the draft, he was my wide receiver one, and I was a little bit on the fence about it. And then I read some work from some other guys that I respect in the industry, and one I respect a lot. You mentioned Scott Barrett before. I read his big model article, and he kind of sold me on Drake London. But looking at Mariota, looking at the Falcons, is he your 102? Because it seemed like we all were 101. Coop, is he your 102 in a rookie draft?
So for me, and this is why I love what Geoff did with trade up and get that 101, is that I kind of feel like, and we're going to talk about Kenneth Walker a bit later, so I don't want to jump too into that. But the question of whether he's my top wide receiver, I think this draft really smoothed out the wide receivers, where after 101 or 102, if you go Kenneth Walker, I don't mind picking anywhere in there. I'm just happy to get one of those guys. I don't think, and obviously us as fantasy analysts, we love to say that we can differentiate and give yourself much, much better odds. But at the end of the day, when three guys go back to back to back in the first round, there's only so much separation you can create in those odds. You know what I mean? So I do like Drake London a lot, especially, in I don't play standard, but half PPR leagues where those big contested catch touchdown guys can make a huge difference. Like the Adam Thielens are much more valuable in that type of format. I do like him there, but at the same time, I'm not crying if someone takes him and I have to take Garrett Wilson, or if I have to take Treylon Burks, or even if my team isn't, if I don't necessarily need the guy to play right away, I don't mind Jameson Williams. Like, I kind of love a lot of these guys, but I will say that Drake London, especially if you had him as your number one, nothing has changed. Nothing that happened this weekend changes where you should have him. And if you had Treylon Burks as number one, I don't necessarily think anything should change for you either.
Yeah. They got their draft capital. I mean, you look at the Falcons, they took him as the number one receiver. You look at a guy like Burks, like you mentioned, and they made a massive trade just to make sure that they secured him. There wasn't a ton that I agree that happened to where you're like, you know what, I was pretty close on these two guys. Now I got to push this guy further. And I know in the draft, like last year, for me personally, I didn't want to pay for Chase, right? But I was right around the range of like I have picks around the spot that I really want to take Elijah, and I was a big Elijah guy. And I feel like, to your point, Coop, that if you are in a range and you can get one of like 3 or 4 guys, you're probably more comfortable than in the past where, at certain spots in the draft, you see this like drop off or a big tier break or something like that. But
if I could add one in real quick,
go ahead.
That exact thing happened to me where I liked Denzel Mims. I really, truly did. And then I saw all these split end needy teams taking T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. And I looked at the draft capital and I said to myself, I can't go past these guys to take Mims. And that luckily turned out to be right. In this case, though, they're drafted so close together, like you said, you don't get that tier. You don't get that thing that's telling you what you have to do, which I kind of like it. You can pick your guy now.
Yeah. Coop, where were you like a few years ago when I took Mims in all my rookie drafts?
I'm taking T. Higgins because I forced myself to. I liked him too. I have my share of Mims too, but I couldn't get beyond the tier break. I couldn't convince myself that I knew something that the Bengals didn't.
Right.
Jeff, that same question, just going back though, about Drake London, 102 or is this a question to be saved for later in the podcast?
I got him at 103 currently, only because I love Jameson Williams and what Coop said about not having to need him right away. Actually, the league that I have the 101 and I actually have the 105, and I'm hoping that Williams falls to the 105 because then I could stash him on my IR if he does not play in the beginning of the season. I'm going to use a taxi squad spot. I could put 3 rookies on the taxi squad, stash him on the IR, and then wait for him to kind of come into fruition. But I love Williams. He was my receiver 4, and then I kind of just looked at Drake London, like I mentioned earlier, and said I think it was more of a 1B than a 1A. So Drake London fell down 1, and Jameson Williams jumped him up in a pretty good landing spot as well. I think the Detroit's offense is shaping up pretty well there. I think he'll fit in perfectly. I have Garrett Wilson at number 1 still. He was number 1 before the draft, before the combine for me as well. So I just stayed with it and left Garrett Wilson there. But as Coop said, I mean, you get any of those guys, Garrett Wilson, Williams, Drake London. I'll throw Chris Olave in there. He had a good landing spot. Treylon Burks obviously taking the spot of A.J. Brown. All those guys, if I can get any one of those receivers there, I'm good to go.
Jameson Williams, just speaking to him briefly, I thought he was going to go to the Falcons, and my mindset was that this team's not super competitive right now. They don't have to rush this guy to be healthy and get on the field right away, and his development can be done the right way, and that's what the Lions are. Like, it makes total sense for them to go and grab this guy and not rush him back. So I like that landing spot actually a lot, just because of that, the state of their team, and he can take his time coming back. But speaking of wide receivers, maybe the biggest occurrence of the draft happened involving a player that was not an incoming rookie, but with A.J. Brown. So blockbuster trade. Eagles traded number 18 and number 101 for the Titans star A.J. Brown. Then they paid him 4 years, $100 million deal with $57 million guaranteed. Looking at A.J. Brown, like just this past season, I think we saw glimpses of why people regard him as a top maybe 3 to 5 wide receiver in the league. Postseason versus the Bengals, 5 catches for 142 receiving yards and a touchdown. Versus San Francisco, 11 for 145 and a touchdown. Versus Indianapolis, 10 for 155 and a touchdown. Versus the Chiefs, 8 for 133 and a touchdown. We know the talent of this guy. We know that he can turn an entire game upside down. So I do, flash back to the draft. I was on the Fantasy Point stream, and we all reacted the way that we should have. But Wes Huber grabbed his head and he screamed out, "This was the worst trade I've ever seen in the history of the NFL." Like, he lost his mind. I think he was looking at his dynasty shares and losing his shit for a second. But it was funny. It was funny. But fact or cap? We'll go to Coop first. The Titans-Eagles draft day deal for A.J. Brown is the worst in the history for a draft day trade.
So worst in the sense of it's bad for the Titans, bad for the Eagles. I'm trying to. What's the? I need a little context on that.
So if we look at draft day trades, so any trades that happen on actual draft day, let's say from a value perspective, what they gave, what they got, is it the worst trade in NFL history?
No, I think the worst trade in NFL history is probably still the Ricky Williams trade, just because of how it panned out for the team that Ricky Williams had a good career, but he was only there for just a little bit. You know what I mean? So as far as draft day trades go, there have been some pretty rough ones. I will say that I love it for the Eagles. You know, like if you think you're going all in now with Jalen Hurts and you're trying to win now, and you convinced Kelsey to come back and Lane Johnson and you're making a run, like this is a perfect deal for them. And I don't even mind paying the money because like look at the free agents next year. I mean, who like unless you can convince Deontay Johnson and Terry McLaurin to leave, it's not a lot. It's like Juju and like Chark and some guys like that. So I like it for the Eagles. For the Titans, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they think they're the new Vikings pulling the little Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's pretty bad for the Titans. So, but I mean, it's just not as bad as some of these other trades. But it's easy to say that in hindsight too. Yeah. So I don't know, Jeff. What do you think, bud?
I think it's like you said, it's great for the Eagles, but it's bad for your AJB stocks. I think that hurts his value a little bit with Jalen Hurts being his quarterback. They got Devontae Smith there. Obviously, Goddard is still there. They like to run the ball. They had 3 running backs last year that touched the ball. So I don't love it for AJ Brown. For the Eagles in general, as far as the team goes, then yes, I think the Eagles made out pretty well there. They did pay him quite a bit. But I do think that he's worth it. He's already shown that he can be worth it. So as you mentioned, all the stats there, he's definitely worth it. For the other side of things, for Titans, they're almost like in a mini rebuild. It seems like they took players that sort of replaced players they currently have. Like they got Treylon Burks. They took a quarterback, Malik Willis. They even got a running back that not replaces Derrick Henry, but they did get another running back that's going to play behind Derrick Henry. So are they sort of inching towards that rebuild? Like, okay, we kind of beat our head against the roof a few times with these players. It's not working out. Maybe we need to change pace. And they just weren't willing to pay AJ Brown that huge contract. So they dumped the contract. They got the picks. Treylon Burks, is he going to be the AJ Brown replacement? I don't think so, at least not immediately. I don't think Burks is that kind of player that's just going to step in and be good. I think they have to manufacture touches for him to get the ball into his hands. I don't think he's quite the route runner that AJ Brown was. So I don't think if you're expecting Burks to be AJ Brown, don't do that. And then if you have AJ Brown's shares, I'm sorry, but I don't think the Eagles are going to be passing the ball enough to really help AJ Brown's stock there.
And you brought up, the look of maybe a rebuild. To me, it's extremely confusing because coming into the year, we know that this team has been a playoff team the last couple years and seem like a somewhat of a contender. They have some hot streaks where they beat some of the best in the NFL. And in the offseason, they bring in Robert Woods, who isn't necessarily the youngest guy coming off an ACL tear. They bring in Austin Hooper. And we're looking at this team and saying, hey, maybe they're trying to bring in some more pieces after kind of whiffing on bringing in Julio Jones the year before and trying to run back at it. And then they do this. So I'm kind of confused. I don't know. Coop, what's your thoughts? I'm kind of confused because I thought it was a team that was starting to bring in some pieces to keep pushing to get a title. And then they almost do something that goes backwards.
I think that Jeff is right in that it's like a pseudo rebuild where you can see the shell of the old team is hanging on and the new team is underneath it, right? Where it's like, almost like a snake, with the skin there. It's like you have this, like they go to these guys and say, hey, Hooper, Tannehill, Robert Woods, like this is your chance. We're going to go out there, even Derrick Henry, because there's 2 running backs in the league right now that are over 27 years old that are starters, and it's Henry and Cordarrelle Patterson. And Cordarrelle Patterson is a starting running back. You know what I mean? So I think they're basically going to these guys and saying, hey, you know what? Like, this is your chance to go out and win it. And if we can't win it with what we have set up here, then we've already got the rest of it kind of built in. You went and got Burks. Obviously, there was issues with Brown, probably from a personality standpoint as well. But, now you have Burks, now you have Malik Willis, like now you have this whole thing underlying ready to go. Jeffrey Simmons is still young where you can reload rather than rebuild now. But I think that all these guys, Tannehill, all of them are on notice that like this version of the team has a chance to win now. Otherwise, like Jeff said, the rebuild is ready to pull the trigger on.
And another thing that stands out about this whole situation that I thought was a bit confusing was the fact that the Jets didn't go and make this deal, because the Jets were like tied in every single rumor this offseason. Deebo Samuel, AJ Brown, they were tied with everything, and Tyreek Hill. They had an earlier pick Did you guys have any thoughts on like anything with the Jets not making this move or going after this move?
I don't know, man. It sounded like they put the offers out there. Like the offer was out there for Debo. I mean, I don't know, Jeff. What do you think? I mean, the picks are the pick. It's not like you can even say that they were future picks and you're worried about the Jets being good all of a sudden, or whatever. Like pick 10, you know, like it was right there.
Yeah, and they ended up with, to me, the best receiver in the draft anyway with Garrett Wilson. So it's like they basically try to get Debo, they tried to get Tyreek Hill. They made offers that were pretty good for both those guys. Didn't get either one of them. Maybe they tried to trade up to get the pick that they wanted, couldn't do it, and then they ended up getting the best receiver in the draft anyway. So it worked out for the Jets pretty well.
Yeah. And last question, then we'll get off this topic. But obviously, this is one of the biggest pieces of what happened over the weekend. But AJ Brown, Jeff, you mentioned yourself that maybe not the best for his fantasy football value. I'm not asking you to whip out your rankings right now for Dynasty, but how much for you? And then we'll go to Coop after. How much for you did this push AJ Brown down your board in Dynasty? Do you think?
So I haven't actually updated my rankings quite yet. I've been concentrating on my rookie rankings, updating those. But it does knock him down a few pegs. I want to say off the top of my head, I think I had him at receiver 3, I believe. I'm not going to drop him down too much. He's still A.J. Brown. I do think that he'll still be a really good player. So I'm thinking just from the top of my head, without trying to think of names, probably like receiver 6, receiver 7, maybe at the most.
Coop, how about yourself? You don't have to give me the exact, but...
Well, that is right where I have him. I have him 7. And
7?
But the thing is, before I was high on him. I was very high on him. And now I have him 7, where now I start looking at it and I'm like, is he that much more valuable than DJ Moore or guys like that? Because now it's similar age. AJ Brown's got the injuries, and now he doesn't necessarily have the similar, the same situation. So, I mean, I think I still like him more, but it's not as easy as it was, Yeah. And for anybody out there, the way I'm looking at it with this situation is that when you have a guy like Jalen Hurts, it's not going to support 3 guys. Like, you can be high on Devonta Smith, you could be high on AJ Brown, you could be high on Dallas Goedert, but you can't be high on all 3 of them. I really think that you're going to have to pick somebody to fade. And that's the thing with these arguments where, we love to argue and stuff. I have no problem with somebody picking Dallas Goedert and fading somebody. Devonta Smith, if you want. Just don't try and tell me that all 3 are going to be good, because I think that's where you're getting into things that historically don't happen. And that's where I will argue with you. And it's no longer opinion, in my opinion. From what I've seen, it's not an opinion. You're going against statistical, historical anomalies,
Which makes sense.
I think it's going to kill their consistency, really, is what it's going to do. I mean, you're going to have the A.J. Brown game. You're going to have the Devonta Smith game. You're going to have the Dallas Goedert game. But you're not going to get it consistently enough that it's going to be worth, the high pick if you draft them in a startup. You're still going to have that inconsistency. You want a guy that's going to be plug and play. I feel confident about him every single week. And you won't get that with the offense, I don't believe.
Yeah, for sure.
You can likely justify guys like Coop said, in your own routes. You might go to Goddard and say, well, for the tight end position, looking at the landscape of things, he's still a guy that I'm going to go after. AJ Brown, I still think from a talent perspective, is still an elite player, so I'm going to go and go that route. Or Devonta Smith, guy they invested, a first-round pick on in the past. I think he's going to be a value because of AJ Brown's presence, so I'm going to go that route. But at the same time, if you are all in on all 3 of these guys, you wouldn't start all these guys in your fantasy team at the end of the day for one, and you probably wouldn't draft all 3 of them because you wouldn't be capitalizing on how you end up taking guys in certain spots in the draft. So I think that's a great point. But value changes. Anything else on that before we move on? I don't want to jump off the topic, but pretty good.
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So value changes happen often. We just talked about AJ Brown. I'm sure people will talk a lot about Jalen Hurts. Another wide receiver to talk about, though, different system. Chase Claypool. I think this is an interesting topic here, but I was looking at the numbers, very, very similar numbers from rookie to sophomore season. He did play a game less in 2021, but nearly spot on for receptions, targets, receiving yards. The big difference was the touchdowns. He had 7 less touchdowns. He had 9 in his rookie season. He averaged 10.6 fantasy points. This is PPR. Last year is his rookie season, and then 12.9 fantasy points this past season. George Pickens now selected number 52 overall out of Georgia. Led Georgia in receiving yards as a freshman, gave him an elite breakout age. His yards per game went up. The next year, he battled through an ACL injury in 2021. He profiles as a guy that has great hands, and we've seen a lot of nice games out of him at a young age. But, some people are kind of juggling around now with, Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett's, this guy in the system, this guy in the system. I think I've seen a lot more people talk about Chase Claypool versus George Pickens now. So factor cap, and we'll start with Geoff. George Pickens destroys Chase Claypool's value.
So I'm going to go fact with a caveat. I think it is a fact that if you own Claypool, his value has now tanked for you. You can't trade him for what you could have probably before this. However, Chase Claypool was not a first-round pick, which means there's no fifth-year option. And the Steelers are renowned for letting the receivers walk. They've done it with everybody. So Claypool in 2 years could be in a new situation. So he's a buy low candidate for me right now. So his long-term value hasn't been killed for me. His short-term value, if you wanted to trade him, probably has. So he's a buy candidate for me. I think Claypool can go somewhere else and be maybe not an alpha, but a good number 2 somewhere else. And the Steelers kind of put the writing on the wall that they're not going to probably pay Claypool when it comes time to pay him. And, you hold on to Claypool for 2 more years, and who knows where he might end up, and his value would definitely increase at that point.
So it really sounds like to you, dynasty-wise, just a big hold right now in terms of what to do with him if you had him. But Coop, same question with George Pickens. Does he kill Chase Claypool's value?
So Geoff hit the nail right on the head. And it goes right into what we were just talking about where, even if they could potentially let Deontay Johnson leave, he's a free agent next year. And I think that resuscitates his value a little bit, even in the short term, but with the 3 of them there and Freiermuth and Najee Harris, it's kind of brutal. And just to go off what Geoff said, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a Patriots fan. Dude, the Steelers situation over there drives me nuts because they've drafted and let more good wide receivers leave than we've ever drafted. I mean, this is going back to they had Emmanuel Sanders and Mike Wallace, and they let them leave because they found Antonio Brown in the 6th round. It's like, give me a break. They let Juju Smith-Schuster leave. Juju Smith-Schuster would be the best wide receiver the Patriots have drafted in 20 years. Like, no, Julian Edelman was a quarterback when he was drafted. Yeah. So it's like, they're driving me nuts over there. Who is the Steelers wide receiver scout? We need to drive over there and put a bag over his head and throw him in a van and bring him up here and just pick one guy for us. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's where I'm at with it. Geoff pretty much said it, that you need to have, you need the targets to be consolidated. Somebody's got to go, or else if they decide to keep all 3 of those guys in Freiermuth and Najee, then you're going to have what Geoff just said last time with the Eagles, where it's the inconsistency is going to kill you because it could be especially with a guy like Claypool, that he'll have the big games and then he'll do nothing. So, I'm there. That is fact that it hurts his value. And I know most of these been capped. So the fact that we throw a fact on the rumors out there, I think that speaks volume.
They were going in the right direction now.
And to answer Toronto Dave's question there about 2 years being a long time. So 2 years is when he would be a free agent. I would suspect that the Steelers in next year, if they were going to move on from Claypool, could try to trade him. They wouldn't want to let him walk. They would want to get some value back. So it could be less than 2 years. It could be just a year before you can get value for him.
Yeah, and shout out to Toronto Dave in the comments, man. Really appreciate it. He also mentions the biggest thing I'm taking away from all of this is that it's hard to support more than 2 receiving options, if 2. And looking at the system, you got a running back that caught a shit ton of passes last year. You had a tight end that popped up a bunch of times too. I almost wonder if a guy like Claypool has any trade value for the Steelers for them to ship him off somewhere. But I guess it's not really in their plans.
So just to Toronto Dave, what he's bringing up there with I've done a lot of work on that, the 2 receiving options. And there are certain systems that you can look at and know right away it's not going to happen. Anytime you have a team that uses a second tight end, and the real killer, the one that I hate for fantasy, is the fullback. Because you say you have 3 wide receivers, a running back, and a tight end. The second you bring in that second tight end, a wide receiver comes out. No more 80%, 90% snap share. And when you bring in a fullback, dude, the Ravens used Patrick Ricard on 43% of snaps. That's more than any of their running backs. That means that when you're bringing that fullback in, because you're leaving the tight end, you're leaving the running back in when the fullback comes in. Yeah. A wide receiver comes out. That's why they can trade Marquise Brown, because they're like, we don't use our wide receivers every snap. So it is possible to have 3 pass catchers if you're going to go full on Rams, same 11 dudes every snap, 88% of the time, 3 or more wide receivers on the field. But you look at some of these teams, and if I see a fullback on the roster, I'm worried about the 3rd wide receiver on that team for sure, and possibly even the 2nd one.
As a Niners fan, I can support that because we have Juice, one of the best fullbacks in the league, and when he's on the field, you're right. I mean, he's not. There's a receiver off the field that's not catching the ball, and sometimes he's the one catching the ball. So, agree 100%.
All right, we're at the 40-minute mark, so I want to move forward. Might skip around a little bit just so we can hit some of the better topics. I know we talked about Kenneth Walker earlier, so I want to be able to talk about him a bit more, especially with people getting ready for their rookie drafts. I think it's important to start weighing out, who should go where. So Kenneth Walker had 1,636 rushing yards, which is 2nd in the nation for college football. This past season, 18 touchdowns for the year. Compact, powerful runner out of Michigan State. 41st overall draft pick to Seattle. I guess he's going to be competing with Rashad Penny. I think John McGlynn was in the comments earlier. He threw out the name Chris Carson, who may or may not play football. Not too sure. I haven't heard tons and tons of updates on him. But the big question, so factor cap here, and I forgot which order. We'll go back to Coop here. But factor cap, Kenneth Walker is the 102 rookie draft pick.
Yeah, for the sake of time here, I'll be quick and say, yes, he is. That's a fact. And the reason being that just running backs carry such value. They're such shiny picks that I would take him. And if I need a wide receiver now and I'm competing now, I just trade him for a wide receiver. You can get someone for him right now, a guy you can start in your roster. And if not, then I trade back, like we talked about earlier, from pick 3 to 7. Who cares? If there's a guy that wants the running back that bad, you can trade for 5 or 6 and feel good about it. So fact for me that he's 102 for that reason.
Same question, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm going fact here as well. He's the 102, and I went back and forth on Breece Hall and Walker as who's the 101 because Breece Hall went to the Jets, which we know historically is not a good place to go when you're an offensive player. And Walker went to the Seattle Seahawks, which overall is a better organization in the long run. Was it Pete Carroll or was it Russell Wilson? The fact that he was there, that's why they were good for so long. But I have more confidence in the Seahawks putting things around Walker to make him successful in the long run. Now, short term, Rashad Penny's there, probably is a day 1 starter. We know Penny has injury history, so it's just one injury away from Walker taking over that role. So I do think Walker is still my clear-cut 102.
Here's a quick side question. So I know we talked a lot about Michael Carter potentially affecting Breece Hall. Do you see Rashad Penny in a perfectly healthy Rashad Penny world, which we haven't seen too much of, but let's say it's a perfect world for Rashad Penny? Does he affect Kenneth Walker's value? And should we be concerned about him being the RB1 and Kenneth Walker being, I don't know, maybe in either a 1B role or looking at a situation like a Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams sort of thing where it's completely split? What's your guys' thoughts on that? Anybody can jump in.
I'll just say I think Kenneth Walker, just said, is a good enough runner that his value is going to be derived from his running ability, much like Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb. Like if Kenneth Walker is the Kenneth Walker we think he is, then any receptions are kind of a cherry on top, Yeah. And we've seen guys on good teams, drop. I mean, we saw LeGarrette Blount being RB1 with 7 catches, So I mean, like it's possible for him to be good even without them. I don't think Rashad Penny necessarily even has that different of a skill set where they even split it. I think Penny would probably end up just being like a change of pace guy for however long he's healthy.
Same wave, Jeff, or how do you?
Yeah, while you were talking, Coop, basically the same. And while he was talking, I looked up Rashad Penny. He's on a 1-year deal. I knew he re-signed, but he's on a 1-year deal. Even if he has a fully healthy season, I don't see them paying him a big contract when they have Walker waiting in the wings. So Penny's one and done, even if he stays healthy all year, which I don't expect him to do.
All right, we'll go to the next one here, and I had this as two separate questions. I'm just going to merge it into one and kind of mix things up because I feel like I've seen a lot of this guy or that guy, and one question I kind of threw out in preparing for the show was, is one guy top 5, and the other one was, did this guy's dynasty value jump a lot? But maybe we can just kind of weigh them both out. But looking at Christian Watson, 6'4", 208, wide receiver that ran a 4.36 coming out of North Dakota State. He's in Green Bay with a depth chart that had Allen Lazard and Sammy Watkins as the top 2 wide receivers in that organization. And then we look over to the Chiefs. Skye Moore out of Western Michigan, a guy with a good route tree, makes guys miss. Yards per route run was solid. He goes to Kansas City at number 54, and both of these guys seem to be shiny new objects. And I'm curious, and we can kind of shift away from the factor cap for this question here, but I'm curious how you weigh these two. Maybe if you're on the clock at this pick, this guy looks better than this guy. Maybe this guy's being overvalued. Just give me anything about these two guys when you're kind of weighing them two out, because again, we're looking at two that went in the second round, and two guys that are on new teams that have a decent opportunity for them, and one might be more appealing for the long run. One might be more appealing for the duration of the quarterback still playing, and this and that. But Geoff, we'll go to you first. Just talk to me about Skye Moore, Christian Watson, how that weighs out.
Christian Watson and Skye Moore, I loved both of these guys pre-draft, and I wanted both of them pre-draft. Post-draft, I can tell you I will not own either one of them because their value is too high now. They're going like 105, 106, 107, and that's too rich for my blood. Skye Moore is not Tyreek Hill. We don't know what he's going to be, but he's not going to step into that role and just be Tyreek Hill like some people think he might. I think there's some similarities there, but he's also very raw. He's got a huge playbook to learn coming from Western Michigan. He's got to learn the playbook there with the Chiefs, which Andy Reid has a very complicated playbook. So who knows how fast he picks that playbook up. And we played this game before, and we had McCole Hardman. Everyone thought McCole Hardman was going to be the next guy up, and he struggled. So Skye Moore, I loved him in the second round when I was getting in like the 202, 203, 204 range. At the 107, which is probably where he's going right about now, I don't really want him. And Christian Watson, kind of the same thing. He's jumped up. He jumped up a little bit in my boards post-combine because he had a huge combine. And then, obviously now that he's going to the Packers, he's got Aaron Rodgers tied to him for a little bit. Again, I loved him in the second round, but in the first round, where he's going, I don't think I want to risk Watson either. There's a reason that, pre-combine, no one was really talking about him until post-combine. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, look at these metrics. This guy's, this and that. But yeah, I don't think I'll own either one of these guys because of where they're going.
So it sounds like Geoff likes the situations, but maybe doesn't like where people are grabbing these guys. And it does seem like they're being grabbed pretty early. I see, takes. I try, in all Twitter honesty, I try not to really scroll as much. I try to, I mean, we all do, but like during this time of year, like you're scrolling and you're just seeing like this way up here, this way down there, and everything in between. But that's an interesting point, though. Like good player, or decent players, good situation. Maybe people are grabbing him too high. But Coop, same sort of thing. Christian Watson, Skye Moore. How are you weighing these two guys out right now?
I'm fully with Geoff. I mean, in a draft just today, I had the 109. The kid wanted Skye Moore, and I gave up the 109 and Gerald Everett for Miles Sanders and Christian Kirk, just because, my team's already competing now. I just need guys to fill in right away. And, it's not that valuable to me. On those two players, this is where we come in, right? Us as analysts. And this is where you can get value. Anyone out there listening, we have it at Fantasy Line. We have a Discord. I know Geoff has it. Nick, I know you answer questions all the time. It matters the league you're in, right? Like you look at Skye Moore and everyone says he's going to be Golden Tate. He's going to be that PPR monster type guy. And then Christian Watson is this super low floor, super high ceiling type guy. Look at your league. If you're in like a 10-man league that starts 2 wide receivers, then you want to go for Christian Watson. You want to go for the big ceiling guy. If you're in a big league, like I'm in one on Sirius, it's like 16 teams and you start 1 million flexes, Skye Moore's a guy that can probably start every week for me. So this is where you got to go out. If you're unsure on those two guys, reach out and say, hey, Coop, this is my league. This is my format. Who do you like better? Because the answer changes based on what you play. Like if you play standard versus full PPR, the answer changes. If you have 3 wide receiver and 4 flex versus 2 wide receivers and 1 flex, the answer for me changes. So definitely use the resources and tools you have to figure out the pick when it comes to those type guys, in my opinion.
I think that's a great point, because I feel like too often we look at prospects or rookies or sleepers and all these terms and all these different values of players and think everything is always black and white. And I play in a home IDP league where we have a bunch of starting offense and defense, and the picks the valuation of those picks compared to your average 12-team Superflex league are very different. And then I have another home league where we have short benches. It's a 10-team dynasty league, and the starting lineups are kind of thin too. And then you're not really starting either one of these guys. And you mentioned some leagues where you're starting, I don't know, maybe you're starting 3 wide receivers and 2 flexes. So I feel like that's a great point when weighing these things out is kind of understanding what sort of league you play in, what sort of format you're playing in, and also kind of where you are at in your league. Because again, Skye Moore might be going in some of these like analyst leagues at 107, but in my suburbs of Chicago league, he's going 204 or something like that. So that's great. That's solid. I like that a lot. Let's go one more question, and then we'll close things up because I don't want to keep you guys here all night. But Malik Willis, you got to mention Malik Willis, especially in Superflex leagues, because prior to the in Superflex, if you're listening, these are leagues that you can start 2 quarterbacks. So not everybody plays in these leagues, but they're growing in the dynasty community. But for Superflex leagues, he was pre mocked as like the 101, 102. Malik Willis, a quarterback out of Liberty, and he's a guy we know the high rushing floor that he was supposed to bring for fantasy. Coming out of college, 2,131 rushing yards and 29 rushing touchdowns for his career. A lot of people looked at him and said, "Hey, we got a rare player of elite rushing upside with a plus arm," but he didn't go number 2 to the Lions, and he didn't go later in the first to the Seahawks or the Falcons. He went in the 3rd round to the Tennessee Titans, 86 overall. So he definitely dropped a lot, and he's now behind a 33-year-old Ryan Tannehill, who is under contract the next 2 seasons. So factor cap on this one. Geoff, we'll start with you. Due to when he was drafted and where he was drafted, Malik Willis should not be a first-round rookie draft pick in Superflex leagues.
That is, it's definitely fact. I mean, you look at any year, just pick a year in Dynasty and tell me when a 3rd-round quarterback was going to be the top 5 pick. It doesn't happen. There's no quarterback going in the 3rd round that's going to be a top 5 pick or top 10 pick even in Superflex, and it's no different this year. Yes, he has the athletic ability, but we always talk about draft capital, and he didn't get it. If he would have went in the 1st round, different conversation. But he went in the 3rd round. A lot of teams drafted quarterbacks above him. A lot of teams that needed quarterbacks passed on him. There's the reason they passed on him. They're privy to things that we're not privy to. So we got to read what the NFL tells us, and they're saying that this kid's not ready. Maybe down the road he will be, but I'm not spending a 1st-round pick on him in the hopes that 2 years from now he'll be really good.
Coop, same question, man. Are you on the same page as Geoff here, or do you see things different?
Yeah, I mean, people generally, they've told me many times now, especially on Reddit, that they hate my take on quarterbacks, which is that I'm looking for quarterbacks that are going to be quarterbacks. Like, that should be the number one thing you should care about, is not rushing out to upside in terms of running. Like, that shouldn't be the first thing you look for. The first thing you should care about is this guy actually going to play quarterback in the NFL? You know what I mean? For more than 1 or 2 years, because a lot of these guys, that's what happens. So that same thing last year. That's why I had Trevor Lawrence first. I was like, I think Trevor Lawrence has the best chance of being a professional quarterback. So I can't go out and run out to best case scenario first when that's the first thing that matters. And in this case, that draft capital, killer, man. Like Geoff said, I mean, half the league was drafted in the 1st round. Another probably quarter was drafted in the 2nd round. There's a handful of guys. Like, Tom Brady's not walking through that door. Yeah. Like, it's like Russell Wilson and then who, as far as guys drafted outside the first 2 rounds. So, the fact that he might, and you look at some of these 1st-round guys, I mean, Jordan Love hasn't even played yet. Some of these guys don't even play when they're drafted that high. So, the fact that he slid that far is very telling in a league where quarterback is crazy important. Think about how important defensive end is. None of the defensive end slid. You know what I mean? Last year, quarterback was so important that they all went in the 1st. And this year, this guy can't go until the 3rd. That is terrifying. Terrifying. The Seahawks and Falcons had how many picks? So many picks they didn't use on him.
Yeah, I think it was very telling how the NFL viewed this guy. And, I mean, hope the best for him. But at the same time, if you go down the list of teams and say, couldn't they use a quarterback? Can this team use a quarterback? There was a handful that could have been on him early, and he just kept going and going and going. And it wasn't like a team like the Seahawks saw him slipping at the end of the 2nd and jumped up to go grab him and make sure that they got him. So that is telling. Pickett, just side question, don't have to go deep into it. Pickett, on the other hand, to the Steelers, different sort of draft capital. You as a fantasy manager, not an analyst. You as a fantasy manager. We'll go Coop and Geoff, and then this will be our last question here. Are you interested in drafting him?
In single QB leagues, my philosophy has always been the same. I take all the running backs and wide receivers I like, and then as soon as there's one I don't like as soon as I run out of the guys I like, then I take a quarterback, or then I take a tight end. So that's Kenny Pickett for me is that guy. I don't think he's, world beater that you have to put him ahead of Burks or any of those guys. But so that's where he is for me. In Superflex, it really depends on how cutthroat your league is, because I'm in, like I said, even the 16 team league I'm in, that's just one quarterback, he'll go in the first round because quarterbacks are cutthroat. I mean, I've had weeks where I didn't have a quarterback at all in that league, because that's just how it goes when, every 16 teams, every team has 2, you're in trouble sometimes. So it really depends on your league, but I think he should be a first round pick in Superflex, just because you hit that point where, Jameson Williams goes and Chris Watson and Skye Moore goes, and then you're like, okay, do I take, James Cook? I don't know, Geoff, what do you think? Are you going for him in the first round of Superflex, or do you have enough running backs and wide receivers that you don't do it?
No, I think right where you were just saying, right in that, like James Cook, Skye Moore, Christian Watson, when those guys start coming off the board, that's kind of where I'm thinking about taking him in the Superflex league. He's not going to be the 101 or the 102 or the 103. Those receivers are just too good to pass up on for a quarterback that, may or may not be that good. And, draft capital is there. He went in the first round, so there is that. There's the Steelers. They're a pretty, patient franchise. They've had the same coaches, 3 coaches in their entire career or their entire franchise history. Same thing with quarterbacks. They stuck by Ben Roethlisberger for so long, even after when he couldn't play anymore. They're a patient, very patient franchise. So I think Pickett could get a chance, and if he gets a chance with the first round draft capital, could potentially, be around for a few years. But those receivers and those running backs that are going ahead of him, pretty much like 107, 108 is probably where I'm starting to think about taking them.
Yeah, and like Coop said too, kind of understanding your league. I had a guy on before that was in a dynasty league, Superflex league, that said it's very easy to trade quarterbacks in his league, and I was kind of like baffled at the time, because I play in like 2 where it's extremely hard to trade those. So I feel like sometimes playing the value of how your league is with the quarterback position in Superflex is important too, because if I know that I can grab them at the 108 or something like that, 109, and other guys I wanted already were taken, and I can sell them for a profit later, that makes sense too. But I do want to wrap things up, because I know we're getting close to the hour mark, but very appreciative of you guys coming on. I know draft season is extremely busy for everybody. So again, thank you guys for taking time out of your days to come on. But want to make sure as we close things out, remind everybody where to find you. And if you got something coming up you want to plug, do it. And Coop will go to you, and then Geoff.
Yeah, for sure. Just follow me on Twitter at Coupe Fiasco. My DMs are open. I'm always answering questions, and I tweet out everything I do. So if I have an article, even an old one that I think applies, I put it in there. Every time I write a new one, every time I got a podcast, it goes up there. So you can't miss it if you follow me. And if you want to see all my old stuff, just go on Google, type Fantasy Alarm Andrew Cooper, and the first link that comes up is just all my stuff. It's nice and easy right there. So
nice.
Yeah.
And Geoff?
You can follow me on Twitter at Geoff Lambert77. It's Geoff with a GEO. It's spelled a little bit differently. But yeah, everything that's from going for two live, everything goes through my Twitter account as well. But you can definitely go to YouTube, search for Going for Two Live. We have a live Monday through Friday, and the way I structured my shows, they're all different. So it's not the same content delivered over and over and over again. Like tonight's show, it's called Press Coverage. It's Kyle Senra as the host, and he has, analyst on, and it's kind of like to get another analyst from behind, sort of like the scene behind that, get the analyst a little bit. I think he's got Shane Manella on tonight. So every show is a little bit different. So you're getting new content every night. My show again is on at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday nights. So check us out for sure. And again, thanks for having me on, Nick. This is always a lot of fun. Love hanging out with you for an hour. And Coop, it's never met face to face, but nice to meet you. And I look forward to seeing some of your takes here on tight ends, because I'm curious to what these rookies look like, because some of them landed some good spots.
There we go. There we go. And if you guys were tuning in, if you guys were in the comments, I know like Dave, John McGlynn, Tyler, there's a bunch of guys in the comments. Really appreciate that. And for me, random stuff throughout the week. But thank you guys for listening, and have a good rest of your night. And good luck in your rookie drafts. Hit us all up. If you're following me and not these guys, go change that now. Have a good night.